In early May of 1982, the Argentine cruiser ship General Belgrano was torpedoed and sunk by the British nuclear-powered submarine HMS Conqueror. 2 days later, the Argentinians hit back. They brought down the British naval guided missile destroyer, the HMS Sheffield. The destroyer was brought down by an Argentinian aircraft which fired the French Exocet missile. 20 British naval soldiers were killed. Subsequently, the British lost 5 other ships in what came to be known as the Falklands War. This was a battle between Britain and Argentina over a collection of islands no bigger than 5,000 square miles. That is the last known instance of a naval cruiser being brought down in war. Up until this past week, when the Russian cruiser, the cruiser of pride, Moskva, was destroyed in the Black Sea. The Argentinian ship General Belgrano, a massive but aging destroyer, was almost the same size as the Moskva. The Belgrano and the Moskva each were 600 feet long, displacing about 12,000 tons. But the Moskva had a crew of about 500 on board. How many of them ended up as fatalities has not been made public. On CRUX Decode, how significant is the sinking of the Moskva? Was it an accident or was it an attack? And if it were an attack, then what does it say about the capabilities and the vulnerabilities of long surface ships? Will countries now start rethinking the missile defense systems required for such long surface ships? According to Ukrainian military officials, Moskva was brought down by a Neptune surface-to-surface missile. The Neptune system is designed to be deployed from coastal areas, which in this case would mean that it was being operated close to an area of intense Russian military activity. If the damage was caused by a Neptune missile, then the Russians appear to have not been aware of it until the very last minute. The Russian side, though, insists that there was a fire on board Moskva and that's what caused it to sink. Nonetheless, the Neptune cruise missile system, it was designed by Ukrainian military engineers in response to Russia's growing naval threat, particularly the threat following the annexation of Crimea in 2014 and the threat that it posed from the Black Sea, even in this current military operation, with cities like Mariupol and Odessa being bombarded every single day. Now, according to Ukrainian officials, the Ukrainian Navy received the first batch of the Neptune 300-kilometer range missile only in March of last year. But here's what is intriguing about the Neptune and why it was not picked up by any of the missile defense systems that are on board long-range cruisers like the Moskva. Naval ships are fitted with a version of the S-300 missile defense system, which operates from a seaborne platform. Modern naval forces would be expected to be equipped with some kind of radar warning receiver to alert the crew on board to the presence of enemy radar systems, although both are far from foolproof. Either of them could fail. Now, one claim that's being made is that this particular missile or a batch of missiles were fired from a hidden battery close to the coast, most likely from the port city of Odessa, which is in the south. The Moskva's crew was distracted by 2 Turkish drones that were operating in the area nearby. Remember, the Turkish army has been providing the Ukrainians with Bakhtiar stealth drones, which have been rather successful both against Russian ground operations as well as operations at sea. The Slava-class cruiser, that was the Moskva, was the 3rd largest vessel in Russia's active fleet. It is one of the most heavily defended assets. It was commissioned way back in the 1970s. It has taken part in multiple military operations from Georgia to Crimea, which was in 2014. The cruiser was equipped with triple-tiered air defense systems that, if operating properly, should have made the Moskva very, very hard to hit and sink. Now, in addition to the medium and short-range defenses, it could also engage 6 short-range close-in weapon systems, or CIWS, as a final resort. The CIWS can fire something like 5,000 rounds in a minute. So what it essentially does is it becomes like a wall of protection around the cruiser ship, something like a last line of defense, if you will. If indeed the Moskva was brought down in a missile strike, then it raises very serious questions over the capabilities and the modernization of the Russian surface fleet. Whether they had enough ammunition, whether they had engineering issues, whether they had adequate missile defense warning systems on board. Now, the Moskva is also one of the largest ships in the Russian naval fleet. Like I said, it is the third biggest that they have and also one of the oldest. It weighed over 13,000 tons. It's 186 meters long. It's capable of coordinating operations with commanding several other ships at the same time. In fact, it's called the Slava, which means glory. It was the flagship of the Black Sea Fleet, as it were. Now, only Russia, the United States, China, Japan, and South Korea currently have this type of ship operating in their fleet. The Slava was commissioned back by the Soviet Union in 1983. It was built in the Ukrainian city of Mykolaiv. One of the main targets of the Russian offensive in this military operation over the last couple of months has been Mykolaiv. The Moskva was a heavily armed, aging ship, but it also had great symbolic value. In fact, the ship at one point of time was even reputed to have a very precious Christian relic on board. In a chapel, it is said to be a piece of the cross on which Christ was crucified. Now, Russia has put out its own version of events as to what led to the sinking of the Moskva. The Russian Defense Ministry has said there was a fire of unknown origin which was detonated on the ship's ammunition depot, and that resulted in massive explosions which left the Moskva with structural damage. Also, the Russian Defense Ministry has said that only 20 people were fatally killed in this particular attack. The rest of the remaining 500-odd crew had been rescued to safety. It says the warship sank amid rough seas as it was being towed away to a nearby port. Irrespective of what caused this, whether it was a missile attack or whether it was an accident on board the ship, it does raise some very serious questions, particularly for long-range surface ships. Ships have always been used by countries to project power beyond their shores. The United States, for example, has done that very successfully from the Pacific to the Persian Gulf. It also raises questions about missile defense capabilities on long ships, and more importantly, whether navies around the world should change their tactics now. Is it prudent, for example, to have long surface ships off the coast of enemy countries in active military operations? Wouldn't they turn out to be sitting ducks, whether it is to drones or to missile attacks? Particularly when they can be targeted from land, either through these close battery missile systems or through stealth and attack drones. Navies are now seriously pushed to invest in anti-drone repellent systems like the Drakes, which the US Navy uses. They will also have to invest heavily in sea-based anti-missile defense systems. The sinking of the Moskva will have far-reaching consequences far beyond this current war. It could go, for example, into what's happening in the South China Sea, what's happening between Taiwan and China. It can also go into the Gulf of Aden, where right now there are not just anti-piracy operations, there's this ongoing military hostility between the Houthi rebels and countries like Saudi Arabia and the UAE.